Order, please. Recognize the member for Burgeo-La Poile.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise in this House today and speak again. Certainly, it only feels like this morning that we were here, and I guess it was. Again, I've had an opportunity to listen to my colleague, the Leader of the Opposition, to listen to the Minister, and certainly to listen to the member for Terranova, who's introduced this private member's resolution. And I'm glad to see the government has recognised the importance of this issue when we're talking about wait times. I mean, this is an important issue when it comes to the healthcare system. And again, I got to go back to the member for Terranova because I've heard him speak more in 3 days. I think this is actually recognised out in the World Wide Web, that he's spoken more in 3 days than in the last 2.5 years. But that's good because he's speaking on an important issue. You're like the Jeffersons. You're moving on up. You're moving on up. And that's good. I'm glad to hear you speak on this. Okay? Okay? But again, getting away from that, this is an important issue. And again, I'm speaking to the resolution, but I actually had to speak to the amendment as well, because the fact is we certainly acknowledge that efforts have been made. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, given the fact that a strategy has just been introduced, we need to acknowledge that more efforts have to be taken to combat this issue. That is very obvious. Now, I have a number of different issues when it comes to the wait list times that I would like to address, and hopefully I'll get time to get through them all. I hope I can stick to each point, because again, there are various ones. Now, one thing I would mention, I'll talk to when it comes to the issue of mental health and wait times. Now, right now in this province, we only have 78 psychiatrists for this province. So when we look at the wait times here in the different areas, there are significant wait times that need to be addressed. We have 4 to 6 months in Buren. In Western Health, it depends on if you're a priority 1, 2, or 3. If you're priority 1, thank God you get there right away. If we are a priority 3, though, you have 12 months that you have to wait for psychiatric services. So we need to make sure that mental health, which is why we've got this amendment there, that mental health is addressed. We look at Corner Brook, same thing. Corner Brook, again, falling under the West Coast, priority 1, 2, or 3. If you're priority 1, you're supposed to be seen right away, but if you're a priority 3, 12 months. In Grand Falls, Windsor, right now, the statistics that we have, we're talking about private psychiatrists, you could have over a 2-year wait time to have the psychiatrist services. And those are the stats that we're looking at that come right from the Canadian Mental Health Association. That's who I go to get my information. And again, when we talk about the information that's been presented, a lot of times there's one thing to have it presented by political staff, but a lot of the information we're getting is from the people actually on the wait list. We're getting first-hand information here that we're lucky to get an opportunity to stand in this House and present. Okay? So I want to keep going on here. Again, I do know what I'm talking about, Minister. I'm going to keep talking about these issues. I certainly will keep talking about them. One of the things I'd like to talk about today, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to talk about autism. Okay? Autism is an issue that was referenced by the member for Terranova. Okay? Autism was brought up by the member. Now, what I would say is it was addressed by the member. It was addressed by the member that the early diagnosis of autism is important if children are to achieve their full potential. Early diagnosis. Now, what I've had an opportunity to do, I had an opportunity to talk to a friend who's actually had to deal with this issue very recently. They actually they got to deal with this issue right now.
Order, please.
Now, what I would say is the member doesn't want me to talk, but I have to talk. I'm going to keep talking about this. I certainly know what I'm talking about, Minister, and I'm going to keep talking about it. This person...
Order, please. I recognize the member for Burgeo-La Poile to speak. I'd like to have everybody's cooperation. Member for Burgeo-La Poile.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, this family, again, are friends of mine, and they received a letter from the Janeway on August 18th. They had their child in, and he had they sent back a letter and said, look, we've got detection of autism. We need to send them to a specialist. And in this case, they were told that there's a 10 to 12 month wait list for the pediatrician. A 10 to 12 month wait list for the pediatrician. Now, they were also told at that time that they have a 12 to 14 month wait list when it comes to the speech language pathologist. 12 to 14 months, Mr. Speaker. And finally, we have a 2.25 year wait list to see an occupational therapist at the Janeway. Now, this is happening right now in 2011, 2012. This family is very concerned. So again, we have to make sure that we're catching this early. Newfoundland is known. We have a prevalence of this. The prevalence of autism in this province has increased tenfold in the last decade. The prevalence of autism has increased tenfold in this province. And again, so when we're getting back to the early intervention and the early diagnosis, we need to make sure that these professionals are available for these families so that they can address this. And I guess what I come back to here is the fact that in 2 very short years, under this health accord, we're going to be dealing with a reduction in our funds. I believe that to be true, a reduction in our funds. So what I'm saying here is that no doubt there's been money spent, nobody's denying that, but we need to make sure that for every dollar spent, we're getting the best possible outcome for that dollar. We're going to have less money to put into this system according to the federal health transfers that are coming up. So what I'm saying is that we just can't say that we're putting this much money into it. We need to make sure that the outcomes for this money spent is the best possible. So again, I want to keep going on the autism, but I'm going to move on because you know what? Autism is an important issue, but I certainly have another important issue that I would like to continue with. One of the things that we've talked about, and this came up a lot in the election, was bed blockage. Okay? It was bed blockage. Now that is a serious issue in this province. Now, when we go back to when we talk about the health accord and there was the 5 subject areas, one of the things was that there was supposed to be quarterly reports sent out beginning in July 2005, and this was followed through. But the last update received was March 3rd, 2011. So we have not had a quarterly report in over a year. We need to maintain these quarterly reports. That information, I believe to be true. I have no reason not to believe it, so we need to make sure that that is reported. Now, the fact is that in certain areas, the benchmarks are being met. The benchmarks are being met. We're not denying that. But in certain areas, the benchmarks are not being met. And that's what we're bringing up here. We're putting a private member's resolution in to make sure that wait times are improved and that the well-being and that the health of this province, of the people of this province is taken care of. We need to put out what is good and we need to put out what needs to be improved. Now, one of the areas, and again, the problem is, and I guess this is due to the population density, is that Eastern Health has a lot of these problems. In Western Health and Central, if you need a knee replacement, you're going to get it faster than if you go to Eastern Health. That is true. Knee replacements at Eastern are a big problem. That's why this strategy is out here. Okay? Again, we're under the benchmark for the rest of the province. This is something that has to be addressed here. When I look at, we have a CIH released a wait times in Canada report back in 2011. So again, you know, not even a year old. Now, from June to September 2010, Mr. Speaker, Newfoundland was reaching its benchmark for hip replacement 75% of the time. Now, Canada is at 84%. Eastern Health is at 60.5%. That's why the strategy is there. That's why funds have been allocated. So again, what I'm saying is we need to make sure that those funds that are being allocated, we get the best bang for our buck. That's what we need to make sure. We go to the next stat here when we talk about the knee replacements instead of the hip replacements. The national average is 79%. The benchmark here is 67%. There's a gap there. 79% average nationally, 67% here in this province. In Eastern Health, 44.5%. The provinces acknowledge this. They're trying to fix it. They're putting money into it. Let's make sure that we're getting the best results for that money. Now, I got to go back to a second to the bed blockage, because 1 in 6 beds in this province are occupied by people that should not be there. They should be getting their health care, take their help, whether that be in a rehabilitative bed, whether that should be in a long-term care bed. They shouldn't be in the acute care bed. And again, I look at the leader of the opposition, or someone who's been in health care his entire life. So again, I'm lucky to have his experience to draw on, as well as our research that we've been doing here. When we look at the cost, again, bed blockage is the biggest cause of wait times in this province. Bed blockage. That is an issue that has to be addressed. Now, what our researchers did when they went around and looked at all this, okay, they actually went to the department with a request for info, the briefing notes, information, documentation when it comes to this issue. The whole idea is to find out, what are we doing? What are we doing to address that issue? What are we doing to make sure? And again, we all know that in 2025, 1 in 4 in this province will be 65 and older. 25%. It's an aging population. We know it's there. It's going to get worse. Okay? So what I would say is, we looked at this. We tried to figure out what was going on. And the results we got back were, and again, I noticed the member for Exploits putting his hand up. He might be one of those scenes. I hope you're not part of the bed blockage. I hope you're not part of it, sir. But what I would say is that when we got the results back from this request, it actually said no records responsive to the request. No records. So what that indicates to us is that this does not appear to even be considered. This is not being considered. So here we have a huge drain on the system. This system that we're going to have less money coming in from the feds, and we're trying to put more money in, and we haven't done anything to address something that is a huge drain on the system. $120 million a year. $120 million a year. I'm not sure. I think that's between 4 and 6% of our annual health care budget. So again, if we're not looking into this now, what are we doing? I would note the member for St. Barb mentioned to me that in Windsor, Ontario, they looked at this issue in 1991. In 1991, they did a study on this. Here we are in 2012, and it doesn't look like we are getting there. So I would say, look, if we're talking wait times, let's make sure that we're looking at this, because this might be the biggest part of it all. Now, another issue here I could move on to is certainly the physiotherapy. Now again, the physiotherapy, when I go to that issue, we have about 200 physiotherapists in this province. We have the lowest physiotherapist per population ratio in the country. In the country. Depending on where you are, the wait times for physiotherapy can be a year or more. I know that's what it's like out in my district. And out in my district, some people don't have that year to wait, so they have to get in their cars, drive through the rec house, drive into Steve Mill, drive into Corner Brook to get private physiotherapy. And they're lucky because they've got insurance that they can do that, but they still have to bear some cost. But there are people out there, and I've sent letters on their behalf. The member for St. Barb just sent a letter on behalf of one of his constituents. They're on income support. They do not have the funds to get private physiotherapy that they need. They're on the wait list. We need to improve that wait list. We need to, this is another very, very serious issue. I know the government's aware of this. And again, we look at the number referenced by the member for Cartwright, St. Clair. At the Health Science in St. Clair's, there's up to 450 patients on the wait list there. So again, I'm hoping that when we look at this private member's resolution that's being introduced, and we're talking about the direction of resources, let's make sure that this is one issue that's taken care of. Let's make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck. Let's just not say we spent this. Let's say how we spent this. How did we spend this money? Now, I guess the last section I'm going to talk about when we talk about the wait lists is another area in my district, and that's the issue of nurse practitioners when we talk about wait lists. Now, I'm very happy to report that the Minister of Health is going to be meeting with the people from Ramia. There's a committee there that deals with this issue. She's agreed to meet with them. Her department has agreed to meet with them. That is great. And I'm looking forward to the town of Ramia. And basically, Ramia still services Francois down in the member for Fortune Bay Cape Lahoon. They represent Grey River. Okay? They handle the health care there. And again, you got to get around by boat here. It's not easy to get around as it is. We have no nurse practitioners there. Haven't had them since September. We get locums to come in from Port Saunders, or we get an LPN to fix it. This is an issue that's causing wait times for people. And these people don't just hop in their car or go somewhere else. These people had to get on the ferry, go across, go on to Burgeo, and again, if there's an issue in Burgeo, they got to go on across the highway. So we need to make sure that these wait lists take into account the people of rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So I would conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying that it's an honour to stand here and speak to this very important issue. The government knows it's an important issue, and I look forward to an improvement in this area of the healthcare system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.